Evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Barry Norman, the head counselor at Expert Admissions, and tonight we're going to be talking undergraduate business with Blaire Moody Rideout, who is the director of undergraduate admission at Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. And we're so happy to have you here with us, Blaire. And we've got a lot of people queuing in as they're doing that. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We have our questions are based on the wonderful questions that registrants submitted. So you're going to hear your questions come up for Blaire as we chat tonight. If you have follow-up questions or additional questions, please put them in the Q&A, not in the chat, and I will be moderating that and taking a look at it throughout our conversation and try to incorporate as best I can. But without further ado, Blaire, welcome. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. So yeah, there's some people still queuing in, but let's get started. We have a lot of questions, a lot of interest. There's always a lot of interest in Michigan, but with the changes at Ross this year, even more so. So let's get right to it. I would love to start with sort of the life cycle of a Ross application. For those who have not been on the other side, if you could kind of take us through the process and kind of what happens after a student hits submit and kind of who reads it and what happens.
Yeah, I'll even, back up a little bit before they hit submit. So Michigan is unique that when you apply to the University of Michigan, you choose a school or college to apply to. So there are 19 different schools and colleges at the University of Michigan, and 10 offer a first-year option. And Ross is one of those first-year admitting units. So when students apply, they choose the Ross School of Business. It's also changed where they don't apply through LSA or another program. And so students are now applying directly to Ross. So when it comes through, when it hits submit, it starts the review cycle. We still really value that relationship with our central admissions office, and they are the territory counselors. They know the high schools well, they know the transcripts well. So it still does go through that process. I think folks get a little confused and they think of those readers as LSA readers or certain college readers. Like, they are trained to read for all the different first year admitting units, and it's more read by a territory type of model. So when an application comes in, it's deemed to be complete in a Students Enrollment Connect portal. It starts that phase of review where it goes to an application reader. After that, it goes to a territory counselor. The territory counselor is going to have the expertise on the high school transcript, what is a rigor of curriculum for the high school and the context. At the same time, the Ross School also has all of those application materials. Our application review is going to focus on the Ross admissions portfolio, which is a big component of our review. We are still going to read all of the common application essays and look at all of the extracurriculars. So there's that review, which are done by my reading team. There's also what we call the OUA review. OUA is our Office of Undergraduate Admissions. Those reviews come to us, and when we make final decisions, final validations in a committee type of process. But it's really important for folks to know that the territory counselor still has a big component of the review, especially when they look at the transcripts and the academic components. And we'll still see those too, the validators, the folks that make the final decision on the Ross side.
Okay. So basically, it's going to be in the central admissions office. They're going to give it a read and an evaluation. You're going to be able to see all of that, and you're going to take their review into account. Then you've got separate Ross folks who are doing the Ross review, focusing more on the portfolio, taking into account what central admissions has done, but doing the full read and complete read of the Ross piece, taking it all together and making the final decision for Ross.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure we're clear. And in terms of, for those who know what it used to be like before the switch, and I don't mean to confuse anybody, but I think there are folks out there who are kind of thinking a little bit the way it was and sort of reorienting themselves. What, if anything, has changed on this back end now that Ross is a first year admitting unit?
Yeah, I think what I will say kind of on the front end, the side of the student, there's that why Michigan essay where the student talks about their major, and students also always got really confused because they were applying to LSA, but they were also applying to Ross. That essay now should really exclusively be business, should be to the first year unit that they are applying to. The back end of it is still really similar. So, we've had first year students in the program since 2016. That's when we launched the Ross admissions portfolio. Um, so we've always done the portfolio review. We've always looked at all of the essays and extracurriculars. We've always taken the territory review, the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, their review into account as well. So review structure hasn't changed a whole lot, in my opinion, in terms of that process of how an application is reviewed. It's just more clarity for the student in terms of applying to one, not through another, and then also hearing their decision at the same time. All of the decisions go out for whether it's early decision this year, it was early action. They go out at the same time. They don't hear then 2 weeks later from Ross like it used to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that makes sense because the way you
Mhm.
described it, it does sound the way it used to be on the
Mhm.
back end, but
Yeah.
very much so there was confusion about that
Mhm.
academic interest essay when you were
Yes.
kind of applying to LSA and
Mhm.
hopefully Ross also was going to be important. So thank you for that clarification. In keeping with the application review and process, can you speak a little bit about standardized test scores? If you could
Yeah.
reiterate Michigan's policy for this year, and then
Yeah.
perhaps even offer some guidance in your response to like how should students or counselors be advising students how to whether to consider submitting scores or not for Ross in particular?
Yeah. So our official policy is test optional. So students can choose whether they submit a test score. I still feel like we're a little bit test flexible because students can still submit other types of scores, AP scores, IB. Um, they can submit different subscores. We super score. One of the things we often say when we go to high schools, and this is kind of repeating what the territory counselor say, the territory counselor knows what a rigorous curriculum is from the high school they're reviewing for. And so if they can see a strong GPA, rigorous curriculum, they know what a strong candidate is if a student's not comfortable submitting their test scores. If though a test score would, answer a question the territory counselor might have in terms of, supplementing for rigor or, GPA, although GPA is still going to be pretty high when you think about the overall poll, that's more the way that they're taking it into account.
So in terms of school, are you looking or do you care more about the math section, given that business tends to be more
We
quantitative or
don't.
not necessarily?
We don't. Not at our business program. So it's kind of getting to curriculum. We still want to see 4 years of math. They don't have to have taken calculus. They will take calculus once on campus. So sometimes it's nice if they can take calculus in high school, but we know that only 40% of US high schools offer calculus. So we're trying to also look at that from an equity lens, but we don't look at math subscores. We will look to see they've had 4 years of math, and we will look to see what grades they've gotten in those math courses and the rigor of those courses.
And
Mhm.
that makes sense. Are
Yeah.
there any other things like either particular courses, either in the curriculum or outside of it, that you feel is more appropriate for a Ross applicant, let's say compared to an
Mhm.
LSA applicant for econ? Because that sometimes also can be
Yeah.
confusing.
I think econ and statistics are helpful. If a student has, maxed out of their 4 years of math or wants to take an additional elective, I do think econ and statistics are very helpful. But that being said, core liberal arts courses or core academic courses are important to us. So a typical degree at Michigan and at Ross is about 120 credits. 54 of those credits are liberal arts. So Michigan has a strong focus in all our degrees on the liberal arts. And so I often tell students too, like I probably wouldn't take those career tech type business courses in high school, and I would focus more on the core academic courses, whether that's math, natural sciences, social sciences. They do need 4 years of English. They do need 2 years of foreign language in the same language. If they've taken it in middle school, they need at least the third year or an additional year in high school. And all of that is laid out on our central admissions website and a grid that shows what years they need of each academic core subject. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and onto the new program, but with Ross and Engineering, Integrated
Yeah.
Business and Engineering, a lot of questions around that. First, can you introduce it in case anyone is unaware of it? And
Yeah.
then I'll have a couple of follow-up questions for you about it.
Sure. So we have a new integrated dual degree with engineering. We're very excited about it. We've been working behind the scenes for 2 years now.
Oh, I bet.
It's and a lot of it has to do with the curriculum. All 18 majors in engineering are open. And remember, Ross, we don't have majors. We have like specializations, which is a unique thing about Ross I can talk about. But all 18 majors in engineering are open. The goal is students will be in both schools and colleges their first year, which that's unique. Usually you have to be in one your first year and then you add the other one on the second year. We hope that because we can start them together the first year, it makes the curriculum planning a little bit easier. These are 2 degrees, so students are still going to be at a high credit threshold per semester. Full time's 12 credits. A typical load is 14 to 16 per semester. 18 is max. Usually dual degree students are at 18 max. But some things we're also going to offer are going to be specialized academic advising and also specialized career resources. It is a cohort model, so they'll have a lot of different workshops. We find that some of these bigger sort of engineering companies really like the dual degree students because it helps with a faster track to management. So I think in particular, I think of Microsoft, I think of Boeing and aeronautics and aerospace engineering and engineers. The engineering degree gives the students the technical skills, whereas the BBA gives the management skills. And a lot of our students that have done this dual degree before the integrated option in the past have told us they've been able to do management a little bit quicker. If you think about students that would be interested in it, students that really like the sciences, but also like problem solving, working in groups, that sort of management side, the action-based learning approach to education that we provide at Ross. And so that would be a perfect fit. It'll be a cohort of 60 students. We
That was my next
enroll
question.
yeah, we enroll roughly 500 to 530 BBA first years, and that goes up every year because we over enroll, to get ahead of summer melt, but we over enroll. So I think it's good that it'll bring the overall class probably up to 560 to 580. Um, we don't have that will be, and that is included in the overall 560 to 580 because your next question is in-state, out-of-state. We will view them as an entire group, that cohort of 60, and not view them alone when we look at enrollment management numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so 60 you're looking to enroll.
Hmm.
And do you have a sense, sort of, well, first of all, I guess if a student applies to this dual program,
Hmm.
is it possible for them to be admitted to just Ross or just engineering, or would
It
they be
is
referred
not.
elsewhere, or is it kind of all or nothing?
It's all or nothing. So right now, how it's listed is a student goes to Ross, actually not engineering, and there's now 2 programs of study that are listed, a drop down for the general BBA, and then the drop down for this integrated dual degree with engineering. And so they are how it works at Michigan when you apply to a school or college and your program of study, that's what you're being considered for, and you can't add another first year unit or another program of study. Mhm.
Okay, so they
Yeah.
would be applying for this dual degree. If the answer is no in the dual degree, then it's just
Hmm.
no. It's not just
Correct.
Ross potentially.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes. Hmm.
okay. And just as clarification for the audience as well, it is the same with now with Ross. If you apply to
Correct.
Ross and you don't get
Hmm.
in, you're not going to be able to be referred back to LSA. It's just
Correct.
done.
Yes.
So that's in
Hmm.
keeping with sort of the model.
Yes. Hmm.
And in terms of preparation for these students who are interested in this dual
Hmm.
program, this dual degree program,
Yeah.
obviously there's an engineering component.
Yes.
Um, Either what are you looking for? Is that going to be a joint
Hmm.
review with, I
Yeah.
guess, central admissions that have, or is there an engineering equivalent that's, that will be taking part?
Yeah, it's a joint review. So it's going to follow the same process with our central office and the territory review, the Ross review, and then my colleagues in engineering will be involved as well.
Okay.
When you think of the type of student, also all of the core courses they need in terms of the level of math, and they'll need physics for engineering in addition to the Ross requirements. Those are all on the website. Um, we're going to look at students, like I said, that have done science Olympiad or in robotics or like this type of maker, type environment, but also working in groups and competitions. And we really see this generation of students, we're seeing more and more students are adding dual degrees with engineering at Ross once they're on campus, which is the reason
Mm,
why we want this dual degree so they can do it from the beginning. Because there is a lot of similarities with some of the tracks in engineering and the curriculum at Ross. Yeah.
And that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, in keeping with that sort of a related question, to what extent do other undergraduate students at Michigan have access to Ross classes or resources, or engineering for that matter?
Yeah.
Ross students, if they're not in this program, have access to
Mhm.
engineering classes here or there. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, so all of our elective courses at Ross are open to all students, just like engineering electives are open. Our core curriculum is not because we're a cohort-based model at Ross, so that's just students that are assigned to sections, but the electives are open. We have three different minors. We have a business minor, a real estate minor, an entrepreneurship minor that students can also add. When we think of co-curricular opportunities, our Office of Global Initiatives will save some spots for non-Ross students in their short-term trips. Our TASI Finance Lab, which is essentially our stock trading floor, if you are taking an elective course, a finance elective, you have access to TASI and you also have access to some of the computer software that can be downloaded on your personal laptop. So there are a lot of resources that are open to students, just as, Ross students take courses at engineering or other schools and colleges across campus. Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and in terms of if a student is, they don't apply out of high school, you know where this
Hmm.
question is going,
I
and they
do.
get to Michigan and they take, let's say, they take a couple of Ross classes and they're in it. They know this is what they want.
Yeah.
How does it work? Is that student potentially able to do an internal transfer, and has
Mhm.
that changed given
Mhm.
Ross being an admitting first year unit the way it is now?
Yeah, so we call that at U of M, we call it cross-campus transfer. And we often joke that some schools and colleges are harder nuts to crack. And Ross is definitely one of those. So is nursing, so is the School of Music, Theater, and Dance and Art, so are some other programs. It's just because we're smaller programs and we don't really have space. So cross-campus transfer at Ross, we have less than 100 spaces. If we are over enrolling our first year class, that eats into my cross campus class. So I usually have less than 100 spaces. Some other unique things with Ross, we don't have a summer term, we have a fall start term. So any students that start in summer, they're going to be looked at maybe first for cross campus transfer because they never had an opportunity to apply. And those are typically like our bridge students or our fall sport athletes. We have other dual degree programs too that are factored into that 100. So there's really not space for students to do a cross-campus transfer. So we tell students and we tell counselors when you're advising students, if you have a student who's applying to other business schools, they should be applying to Ross if they're applying to Michigan. There's no more applying to LSA and waiting to get in because we do not have spots. And that has really, it is a big change with us being a first year admitting unit, but we've been making that change since we moved to a 4-year program gradually where we just have a very small number of cross-campus spots. So the best option for students where we have the most spots is to apply out of high school. Yeah. And when you
Right.
look at like the profile, the academic profile, we may be a smidge more competitive than LSA, similar to engineering, but our academic profile is pretty similar, the admitted student profile to LSA, and especially if you have a student who is in business organizations, knows they want to do business, and they have the same profile as an admitted student to LSA, they're probably going to be a good candidate for Ross. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
And you had mentioned a few moments ago,
Hmm.
I think it would be helpful as a reminder to people listening about the fact that Ross doesn't have majors in the way that some
Yes.
others do. Could you speak a
Yeah.
little bit about
Oh,
that?
This is one of the things I love. So I've been in this role for about 13 years, but before that I was an academic advisor at Ross. And it's one of the things I love because we can constantly change what students want to major or specialize in. We don't have majors. So, we have the typical accounting, marketing, management, finance, but we have new specializations or more niche ones like sustainability, entrepreneurship, social impact, nonprofit management, fashion merchandising, and we just added artificial intelligence. So when you have like a major of 30 credits, you have to go through faculty senate approval and all of that. And when you're just this broad-based BBA, it allows us to evolve the curriculum a bit quicker, and students can do 2 to 3 areas of specialization. And we advise students on what that means. So if you have an accounting specialization, it's probably going to be 5 or 6 electives. If you have an entrepreneurship specialization, it could just be 2 electives. Specializations are not on transcripts, they're on resumes. So we tell students that when you interview, if you're going to list a specialization there, you got to be ready to talk about it with the employer. But it's very self-driven. And it's also really nice that they can change quickly. Like if I do my junior year internship in this field and then I realize, oh, that industry is not for me, I can pivot and not have to stay an extra year or redeclare a different major. So it allows a lot of flexibility. And we also are big on like the intersection of different areas of business. And we have an integrative semester where we team teach different types of courses and apply a case in a different way to all different subjects. So we're big on this integration as well with the specializations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, And then pivoting back a little bit to the application.
Yeah.
So the Ross portfolio, as you mentioned, is central
Mhm.
to the review, and it's quite
Mhm.
unique and a lot of fun,
Yes.
actually.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I'd love to start with the artifact essay. I think the word artifact
Mhm.
throws people off,
It
first of all.
does.
But
Yeah.
can we just talk about sort of for the artifact,
Mhm.
kind of what you're looking for, what you really have in mind when you came up with this idea or this question, sort of what are
Yeah.
you hoping to learn and what makes a good one?
Yeah. So the artifact. So I should say we have a blog, the Ross Undergraduate Admissions blog. We have a whole page dedicated to the portfolio. We have different videos, and we'll be pretty transparent on the blog and on the website. We even offer samples, examples of what students have submitted. So we tell students the best way sometimes to describe it is tell students, think of your 4 years of high school. What are you most proud of? Where did you grow? Where did you learn? Where did you contribute to community? Where did you really help your peers? Because it is a learning artifact. It can be something in the classroom. A lot of times it's actually not, and it's more where the extracurriculars really come to life. It can also be an identity artifact. It can be a cultural artifact. It can be something they do outside the classroom. We also, too, like this generation of students, they're content creators and they have different blogs. They might give a YouTube video, which they don't need to create a video, by the way, but we just know that's where they are, this generation of students. So they might be, put a lot of work into a blog, a video, spending their time in this extracurricular. They do a lot outside of the class. And so that's typically what we want. And it's also not like the sort of what they're choosing, it's more the why and the reflection. So the review is really focused on the 250 words. And that's where they're telling us like where to focus in their artifact. Like this was a challenge for me. This is what I learned. This is what I contributed. This is what I overcame, or this speaks to who I am. And so that's kind of what we're looking for. I sometimes think students, though, think they need to wow us in a lot of ways, like create a business, create a product, and they don't really need to do that. One of my favorite artifacts, and Barry, you might have heard me talk about this, and we have a video on it, is the student that had a blog, and it was a personal blog, and she would just write about like the happenings in her mind. And she had one blog post that was called The Aesthetics of Calculus. And it wasn't like she solved a really hard mathematical formula or created something new and powerful. It was just the fact that she enjoyed calculus because once she solved a problem, it felt complete to her, and the aesthetics of numbers were very pleasing to her and calmed her. And so she wrote a whole blog post on this. And, when our faculty, remember the committee that day, and our faculty member said, "This is what we want to see, that sort of like thirst for knowledge and thirst for learning. This is it." And we tell students that all the time, that we want you to learn for learning's sake and not for a grade. And it's hard to articulate what that means. And I think that blog post in her artifact perfectly summed that up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you touch on a really important point because we hear it a lot too. And, students and families will hear about, standing out.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think the mind automatically goes to standing out in a way that almost like a sore thumb, like you
Yes.
need to have a gimmick or you need to do
Yes.
something they've never
Yes.
heard of before,
Mhm.
because that's going to make me memorable, or I'm going to take
Mhm.
my unique experiences and
Mhm.
that's what's going to do it. And to your point, it's never about the what, it's always about the why, the how, like, so what,
Mhm.
what's next, what happened next,
Mhm.
And I think the focus on that, that idea to sort of again impress or stand out in some
Mhm.
way. And you can't fake like a
Mhm.
true intellectual curiosity. And
Yes.
that's okay, by the way. There, everybody
Mhm.
has things. And I think your point, your example is a wonderful one, but let's even just say someone who says, well, I'm never gonna be writing about calculus, right? But like even if it was something else that you think of as not as impressive or
Yeah.
academic, if that's
Yeah.
what you love, the same kind of curiosity and engagement will come through. And so I
Mhm.
think sometimes people are so thirsty for a formula or to kind of like, what do I
Mhm.
need to do? And
Yeah.
it really is about digging deeper into yourself and taking that
Yeah.
analytical lens and pointing it
Mhm.
inward.
Yeah.
Um,
We can also really see things when the artifact is really superficial and doesn't mean anything to the student too. They just think it would wow us.
well, you
Uh,
read enough essays, right? I think people don't
yeah.
realize also when you're reading thousands of them, like when
Yeah.
you have somebody who really cares, it
Mhm.
sounds and feels different,
Mhm.
So something can sound
Mhm.
good or be well written, but it's not going to be
Mhm.
compelling,
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I think there's a big difference between those two, and it's lost
Yes.
on a lot of folks.
Yes.
So I'm glad to hear you saying that you can see it and kind of what speaks to you. I think I hope it helps kind of calm people down a bit and not
Mhm.
wring their hands as much about what can I think of, as opposed to just thinking, who am I and what parts do I want to share, instead of
Mhm.
sort of searching for something and working backwards.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a really cool exercise we do at Ross with executive education called Best Self, and we do this when we do portfolio workshops. Essentially, you ask, 3 to 5 peers, colleagues, supervisors to write a story about you when you were at your best. And then you see like things where you were shining your light, you were good at this, you were good at that. And we tell students sometimes like go to your favorite teacher, go to your best friend, go to a parent, ask them when you were at your best, and they'll give you examples, and sometimes that helps you write the artifact. Yeah.
Yeah. And with the
Yeah.
artifact, would you say it shouldn't be about something relating to either academics or business? Like, should it be extracurricular or technically open?
It's open.
Okay.
So I will say, we have seen students that have said they've started a business and it's not really a business, it's more of a service. And I remember one student did this one time. They said they started a business and it wasn't really a business. And, we were looking over their application in the committee. We were like, gosh, they were president of student government. Gosh, they had this leadership. Why didn't they talk about that instead of trying to impress us with something that wasn't really a business? So it also does not have to be business related. This goes back to like the broad nature of business. Again, when I do portfolio workshops, before we go into the portfolio, we talk about elements of business and how it relates to other things. Like I often talk about how psychology is the backbone of marketing and management. And we talk about different things like that and how business really touches all aspects. And so to get them out of the thinking of that my artifact has to be something business related, it absolutely does not. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
also, I think sometimes it comes up, when applying to a very specialized program, the way any undergraduate business program
Mhm.
is relative to being able to say, I'm undecided in arts and sciences.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes there's some confusion with regard to being narrow, like kind of focused enough and engaged enough in, let's say, business related to prove why you're showing up for this more
Mm-hmm.
specialized program. And then
Mm-hmm.
also being humble enough to also understand and reveal, like, yes, you understand that you're going to school because you don't know everything already. I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there's a tendency to try to overcompensate and forget that you're applying to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's okay to not know it all or have it figured out and to have interests that
Yes.
are leading you here. Of course, you should engage in business in some way if you're showing up at Ross, but it doesn't have to be everything, that you do, and you don't have to have all the answers.
Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, Great. And then with the case discussion, can we switch to the other part of the
Yeah.
portfolio and talk about that?
Yeah, so the case discussion is a mini case analysis. So in the Ross classroom, we do a lot of solving theoretical cases, not a lot of long research papers or multiple choice exams. It's a lot of working in groups, projects, presentations, public speaking, solving cases. So we wanted something in the admissions process that was an exercise in problem solving, and that's essentially what this is. So it is not a research-based prompt, so we don't want any citations. We want local issues. I always tell students, like, the first sentence, state what the issue is. If you have to provide me any definitions, you've picked something too large to handle. So state what the issue is, give us two or three business implications, or and don't even maybe take even the word business out. Give us two or three issues that this problem is causing, and then provide us your solution. Um, we are looking through how a student thinks through a problem. We're not looking to see if the solution works, but we do want them to think through a solution. You know, a mobile app doesn't solve everything. A lot of times students will just end and it just kind of goes off a cliff, like, I would create an app for that. So we want something a little more thought out. When you think of topics to choose, again, there's a lot of great resources online and examples. Two that I've been sharing this year when doing portfolio workshops from two students last year. We had a student who was a student from Michigan. Their issue was a large farm that was very much like very much a part of this community and this family for generations, passing generation after generation, and the farm going up for sale and a data center wanting to come in. And so there was a little bit of like so there was a little bit of what we know now about data centers and water usage and all of that. But this was a little bit of an issue local in the community, some environmental sustainability issues, and then the student providing a solution of what this could be turned into. Something very local tells us a little more about the context of where the student lives, also what they're thinking through, maybe where their interests lie as well, maybe sustainability, environment, who knows. Doesn't have to like tie with an interest though. Another one more common to a student in a high school environment. The student told us, she told us like, hey, the yearbook doesn't sell at my school. Only 40% of the class buys the yearbook. This causes a budget issue for the school. She gave some other implications on community. And then she said, this would be my solution. I would do different tiers at the beginning of the year to lock in different prices and do some marketing efforts. So a little bit more marketing and that solution there. We're not looking for global issues. We're not looking for homelessness, poverty. I've often said this before, every time there is Olympics going on, we typically get economic essays about the economics of that country and why the Olympics should or shouldn't be there. It's not what we're looking for. We're really looking for something local. Maybe we can learn something about the student. We're looking how they work through a problem and what a potential solution would be. Another caution I have is don't pick something they've already worked on or solved, because it becomes too much more about the solution of I did this, I did this. This was a plan we did at DECA. That's not what the business case discussion is. They really should pick something hypothetical, because when you've already done something, you go straight to the solution and then you lose all of the business implications and the thinking that we want to see in an essay.
That's great advice. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
And with regard to what they choose, a question had come in about sort of
Hmm.
the balance between, I know you said it doesn't have, you don't have to have the solution, but
Hmm.
a question came in about sort of the balance between like idealism and sort of practicality. Can you speak
Yeah.
to that a little bit?
Yeah, we're practicality. We are not judging whether the solution would work. Practicality, sometimes students can get lost too much in like a common type of problem too. So sometimes it's best, maybe a little bit more idealism for the student to think about like where their interests are, probably something they're passionate about in their community, and then to work through that. I know other schools like at architecture programs or engineering programs do like maker portfolios, and they're actually looking to see if if the what the student created like works, makes sense. And that's not our process at all. So I'm not looking to see if your solution would really work in the real world. I'm not testing that. I'm more testing how you pull out an issue, how you apply multiple perspectives, different type of implications you might see, and then how you tie that together in like a concrete, mature solution, but not whether the solution works. Yeah.
Okay. So more of that critical thinking,
Yes.
those skills, and then
Yeah,
maybe
critical thinking, creative problem solving. Yeah.
great. A couple of questions. I've just been looking at the questions that are also coming in. Just a couple of clarifications because several people got a little confused, I think, from hearing some of the numbers. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It's
Sure.
that the cohort for the combined Ross engineering program will be 60 students. That's
Correct.
the enrolled number of students that number of students you're planning to enroll in that specific dual degree program. And then
Correct.
Ross historically brings in about 500 to 530 undergrad first years each year. That
Hmm.
doesn't mean that's how many are admitted, that's how many are
Right.
enrolling.
Correct.
And then it will probably go up a little bit this year because of this new program that's coming
Hmm.
in as well.
Yes.
Did I represent properly?
You did.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure there's been a number of questions of sort of
Yeah.
clarifications on the numbers with people thinking that that's the number of admitted. And I just wanted to clarify.
No, we have a public profile on our website too, the Ross admissions website, that'll show you the number that were admitted last year and the number of applications. Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Um, and then can we talk a little bit about AI?
Yeah.
Because that's sort of, I mean, you
Yeah.
mentioned that you added a new
Yeah.
program for that. It's something that has come up quite a bit, obviously, in the last couple of years, but it really seems to have reached like a fever pitch around college admissions and essays in this sort of entry into this cycle.
Yeah.
Would love to hear your general guidance about it and thoughts
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. I feel like so I've been doing this a while, and I also work in a school that has MBAs and graduate programs. And we don't in undergrad, but in our MBA program, they've always scanned for plagiarism and different things. I'm already kind of using AI tools, and it'll give them a percentage back of what was plagiarized or written with AI. We're not to that point because we've always like it with high school students and college admissions, the content is way more important than often how it's written, okay? And so what I've seen with AI type of essays that we believe are AI generated, there's too much words in it and not enough learning about the student or the content of the student or the experience. If you look at all of the Michigan essays, if you look at the portfolio, they're all pretty personal. And so for us, we have essays we've used in the past that are like great creative writing pieces, but have scored low in our process because we don't learn anything about the student. So I would say, I am not adverse to AI just because we're using it at Ross and, we're experimenting with some things in admissions too. And I think it's a tool that our students are going to need to use in the future and need to use it ethically. But I think at the end of the day, the essay content is really important and they need to really think about the way they're getting to that. And I don't think AI is the best way to get to the type of essays we're looking for at Ross. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think it can sometimes sound good, but if you pay attention, if you're actually paying attention, I always say it kind of sounds like it's saying everything and nothing at the same time.
Yes.
And so, it sounds good,
Yeah.
but obviously you're paying attention and you're reading so many essays. So I
Yeah.
think there is a trickiness to it. It can be helpful with generation
It
and
can be
things
helpful with
like that.
idea generating. Yeah.
um, for sure. And then also switching, the biggest news I feel like in admissions this year was
Hmm.
Michigan announcing early decision.
Yeah.
And I'd love to, if you can share just a little bit about the program.
Yeah.
And do you know what percent of the class you plan to take in early? That was a
Yeah.
big question from people as well.
Yeah. So we're really excited to have an early decision option. I know in my space at the business school, we've heard from a lot of families and a lot of counselors over the years that it would be nice for Michigan to have that, especially for schools like, engineering and business. But it's nice that it's for, all the schools and colleges except for music, theater, and dance. So um, we don't yet have percentages to share. What we are talking about in a lot of the committees are quality, and it's we're going to really look for the quality overall, both early decision and early action. So it's going to be high quality for early decision. Early action has always been really good to us, and we've gotten a lot of high quality students there as well. I think the thinking for ED is more for the students that really want Michigan and are high achieving students and felt that they wanted an ED option but didn't have it. I was visiting high schools last week. I was sharing with Barry, and every high school I'd go to, for the most part, they were excited, and the counselor would tell me, "Hey, I got two that are ED. They're really excited for this option." Another benefit I really like about this ED program is that if a student is not offered admission through ED, they are deferred to early action, not regular decision. And I think that's really positive and something that we wanted to protect because I think we also, like I said, early action has been really good to us. And so we'll get a lot of quality there too. So for us, it's looking kind of holistically overall at the applicant pool.
And those students who are deferred into EA from ED, they're going to
Mhm.
find out around the end of January. So they'll kind of get a
Correct.
decision mid-December and then another decision relatively shortly thereafter.
Correct. Yes. Hmm.
Great.
Yeah.
I was looking through some of the other questions that have come in, a number of questions relating to kind of like average scores and GPAs, and that's all on your
Hmm.
website. So
Correct.
rather than
Yes.
spend time having you rattle off numbers and
Yeah.
statistics like that, I think we love that you're so transparent with the
Hmm.
information that you put online for students and families and counselors. So definitely go there for those asking about
Hmm.
the profile questions. I'd love to step back a little bit and talk a
Hmm.
little bit about undergraduate business.
Hmm.
It's a question I'm sure that comes up for you. It certainly comes up for us as counselors and in family discussions. Should I or shouldn't I, right? Whether it's a
Hmm.
particular question, should I do LSA and econ
Yeah.
or should I go for Ross? But even more broadly, like, should I do an undergraduate business program? Can you
Hmm.
speak to that and how
Yeah.
students may figure out what the answer is for them?
Yeah. So we talk about how an undergraduate business degree is a professional degree, and our students don't often go on to get an MBA. They're ready for the workforce and they get really great salaries after their Ross experience. How I talk about it with the students are like the differences in curriculum. You can still pursue business through LSA, through economics, mathematics, actuarial science, organizational studies, even psychology in some ways. The difference is the type of instruction. So an LSA focus is going to be very theoretical, whereas and a BBA is going to have some very tactical courses. I often give the example of one of our technology and operations course, TO 411. It's a course all done in Excel. We teach them how to write code and macros in Excel. We teach them how to do different financial models, whether it be corporate finance, banking, financial services. And then we also teach them how to do marketing research and different spreadsheets and modeling in Excel. It's a great course. AI is, of course, expediting that because there's all these different AI add-ons to Excel, but we also now have AI courses too, right? So that type of coursework is not something you're going to get in a liberal arts focus. So the practicality. The employers love the BBA. We have a 99% job placement rate. The median starting salary is $100,000, much higher than that for financial services in New York and San Francisco. A lot of signing bonuses for financial services. So, and that's because the employers know like the type of skills a Ross student comes out with, like the type of Excel skills. We hope we're going to build the type of AI skills the companies want. They know the skill set that a professional undergraduate business degree has. They often tell us, that they like to hire BBAs over MBAs because their skill set is there. And then if our students are going on to get MBAs, they're typically feeders for some of the other top programs or they have work experience first and their career changing or the company's paying for it. But these are professional undergraduate degrees that companies can pick them up and know exactly what type of skill set they have. But I will say students, that like the theoretical side of things, we also have different one-year master's programs. We have our one-year Master of Management program, which is designed for liberal arts students, especially those at Michigan. It's kind of like a 10-month condensed BBA that will give them some of those skills. And then we have our different minor programs too.
Okay. And in terms of when students are, could you give a sense of how a student who would be a more possibly successful applicant to Ross? What does engagement with business look like for a high school student?
Yeah.
What might that look like?
It doesn't have to be business oriented. I think it's engagement, it's leadership, it's working with others, it's professionalism. One of my favorite stories to tell is a student that now works in corporate strategy for a large entertainment company in New York City, Viacom. And she worked for Marvel for a bit, she worked for HBO for a bit. And when you looked at her high school application, it was all theater related. But she was the person who was doing the business stuff. She was securing the space for the production. She was working through contracts. She was doing all of this high level stuff for this little theater group she had at her school. And she talked about in her essay, she knew exactly what she wanted to do. She loved theater. She wasn't the best performer herself. She was more of a person that was organizing and leading. And now she works in corporate strategy. We often talk about the student who's the ad manager on the yearbook. They don't have a business club at their high school, but they secure all of these ads. We talk about the student that might be the representative for the school board, the student representative. They're learning professionals, development, speaking, professionalism, all of that. So, and of course, we're seeing students that have DECA experience, that have business experience, and that's great too. But we're also looking at more, again, the what than the why and what they're contributing and what they're learning. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, it's funny because you're saying it doesn't have to be business related, and then you mentioned, right, like the yearbook ad manager
Hmm.
or, the theater person working in the theater. And to me, those
Hmm.
absolutely are business, right? It
Yeah.
might not
Hmm.
be, I think there is often a knee-jerk reaction, like I need to work in a finance firm, or I need to like,
No.
and by the way, usually the opportunities there are pretty passive. If you can even get
Yes.
something like that, there's
Yes.
actually not much
Yeah.
that's going on for
Yeah.
the student. Could you speak
Hmm.
to kind of that
Yeah.
mentality and sort of a bit?
Yeah. If a student has an internship, we really want to know like what they've learned and what they've contributed. And we know that our first years don't even get finance internships. So it's interesting to see when a high school student has it. We really value student jobs, and we don't see many student jobs. We value retail jobs, fast food jobs, working as a lifeguard. That is actually one component, one type of high school experience that's very separated from parental influence, and they have to work with a supervisor that's not a parent or a trusted teacher or someone an influencer in the high school. And those are things that are kind of on the decline. We haven't really seen a whole lot of student jobs because of the checklisted childhood, and everyone has all these different activities and organizations that we're missing out on really things that build self-efficacy, which would be part-time jobs. And so I'm much more interested in a retail job than I am maybe a finance job at this great named company. But I really know that a 16, 17-year-old isn't contributing actively in that finance internship. So we're looking for typical student experiences that give them growth in different competencies. Yeah.
Yeah, I love jobs because I think, I mean, anybody who's ever worked a job, you deal with all different kinds of people.
Yes.
Like it's going to be
Yes.
days that it's not what you expected, and you're going to be asked to
Yes.
do things you don't want to do. And there's really no way around it. It is what it
Hmm.
is. Like what you see is what you get. If you
Hmm.
worked part-time in the Gap, like I know
Hmm.
exactly what that entails, no matter how you want to package it up and make it sound like.
Yes.
And there's so much to be learned. But I do think,
Hmm.
and it reminds me even about recommendations. Sometimes people are eager to get a recommendation from a higher ranking person or a recognizable name, and it's really about no one cares how good the writing is. It's how well do they
Hmm.
know you and what can they say about you? And is it
Right.
what they're going to say? Is it relevant to the Ross review process or whatever review process?
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
do think there is this sort of like kind of assumption that the fancier, the better, or the more
Mm,
impressive sounding. But again,
mhm.
where's the meat to it?
Yes,
And I would imagine that you see that also a lot.
we do. Yeah. Mhm.
When students are thinking about sort of testing the waters of like, is this right for me? What are some questions that you think that they might ask themselves? Like, is
Mhm.
an undergraduate business program right for
Mhm.
me?
Yeah. So, um, do they like solving problems? Do they like working in groups? Do they like leading their peers? We talk a lot about leadership. We just talked about, working with a client base at a part-time job. In our first year seminar, BA 100, what we really work on first semester is how to work in groups, how to give feedback to your peers, which is really difficult for students coming out of high school to do. Like they've never really had to do that. They actually have to give grades to their peers in all of the courses. And we talk a lot about like what it means to give a peer a grade. And you don't give everyone a lower grade and yourself a higher grade. Like this is how feedback works in the workforce. So I think students that want to be change makers, want to be problem solvers, are good group learners. Sometimes individual learners that can score really high in test scores and have perfect grades, but struggle in a group environment aren't always the best for Ross. Like we are modeled after an MBA program, so a lot of public speaking, a lot of comfort with your peers, a lot of problem solving. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also leadership, right? Even the
Yes.
definition of that, I think there's a kind of antiquated um,
Mhm.
definition that a lot of people hold on to. What does that look
Mhm.
like? What is a good leader?
Mhm.
You were just kind of sort of kind of referring to that in a way of the idea of giving yourself the higher thing, or a good leader isn't someone who just has the solutions and then tells everybody what to do
Yeah.
and then they follow.
I
And
think,
I
yeah.
think there is that
Yeah.
sort of knee jerk to kind of, well,
Yeah.
I have all the answers. Everybody is going to follow me because I'm the one that kind of has all the
Mhm.
answers, which is so the opposite of
Yeah.
what a good leader is.
I think students are surprised. We do participation, obviously, like, faculty grade participation, but in a lot of our courses, it's quality of participation, not how often and how often you speak. And so we talk a lot about leadership as listening is a really good tool for leaders and one of the strongest tools you can have. And so you're absolutely right. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I think the more it's so hard for students when we say, be yourself and really, because again, I think there's a sense that there's like looking for certain things or check boxes. And for the parents listening, when around my age, like people who applied, 30 years ago, that was enough. You could just check boxes, like have a leadership title. It didn't really matter if you did anything or not. It was kind of good enough, or there was assumptions because you had the title,
Hmm.
and I think there's just more of a focus on substance now, and so
Yes.
you don't even need the title. Now you just have to kind
Hmm.
of do it and get out there and do something.
Hmm.
And if students, I think, would lean a little bit more into that, I think they'd
Hmm.
be better off. But
Yeah.
um, and yeah, and then just a couple of clarification questions before we wrap up, also just from folks in the audience is, can you just reiterate the decision timeline and the decision options that will come out of ED versus
Hmm.
EA
Hmm.
versus regular?
Yes. So ED students apply by November 1st. They will hear a decision by mid to end of December. They then have a commitment date of January 6th. So that is binding. That's early decision. The early action plan, they apply by November 1st, which is the same deadline as ED for applying. They apply by November 1st for early action. They hear from us by the end of January, and they have until May 1st to make a decision to submit their deposit. Regular decision, they apply by February 1st. They hear at the beginning of April, is what it's kind of guaranteed to be. So early April, and then they have until May 1st.
Okay, and for ED, is it deferred, postponed? They're going to go, if they're deferred or postponed, it will be to EA. Can they
Correct.
then be, whatever word you're going to use, deferred or postponed to regular, or they get a final answer at that
They
point?
can potentially be postponed to regular. Yeah.
Okay.
And then they
And
can go to wait list too.
right. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And postponement still the kind of language for deferral.
Yeah, yes, we call it, casually deferral, but postponed is what they'll receive in their communications. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then just a couple, I'm just looking real quickly, just there were so many questions, and for those, I'm sorry, I can't get to all of them, but just looking at the ones real quickly. Um, I think the ones that I'm coming up here, I think actually for the most part are things that people can find on the website with the
Mhm.
with your profile, and some things that are super specific. A couple of people just asked for clarification about what you said regarding foreign language and middle school, like whether those
Yeah.
credits would count. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, so we're looking for 2 years of the same language in high school. If you are a school district where the student took foreign language in middle school, they do need at least 1 year in high school. So for some students that took the 2 years in middle school, seventh and eighth grade, they will need a third year in high school. So a foreign language is a requirement for LSA. It is one of the distributions you can choose at Ross. And coming out of high school, we're looking at 2 years in the same language. And that is how we look at middle school.
Okay, and just to
Yeah,
also clarify, that's sort of a minimum. I mean, or at least you
that's a
need that.
minimum. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Mhm.
And then I think the last question just that came up, I think I know the answer. If a student applies ED and is postponed, can they change to LSA at that point? No,
No,
right?
no.
Right, you're applying and then you're
Correct.
sticking with your decision,
Correct.
through.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
Yeah.
Blair, for
Thank
joining
you.
us. This has been wonderful. We appreciate you taking the time during this super busy time of year, and also for being so generous and transparent and helpful, so that people can make better decisions and can feel hopefully a little less stressed about this process.
Absolutely. It's important to do so.
All right. Take
Yeah.
care. And of course,
Thanks, you
go
too.
blue.
Go blue.